Hello, welcome to the first ever episode of The Living Room. I am your host, Gamerizer. I'm here with James the Liberated.
Uh, Hello. I am James Liberated. Yeah, you can find me on YouTube. Just the James Liberated. That's just what it is. I mean, they're just gonna call me James, except James Liberated. That's cool. It's Stratino.
We don't care.
We already started. Go.
Yeah, I know. Go. Come on. I think that's about it. Isn't
Stratino, that's...
it?
Stratino.
Schizoid goes next.
No,
I go
it's
next?
alphabetical order.
Yeah.
The
Schizoid, man.
list, literally... Okay, Stratino, go.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm a Stratino. I mainly go by either Stratino Lampino or Gaslighting Abby. I have both of those channels. One of them just doesn't even have anything, but you can subscribe to it to give me money even before I make any videos. I think that's how monetization works. Anyway, I have literally nothing better to do most of the time. So if you just want to like argue with me because you disagree with me, just like at me at Ingrid Bergman. That's about it about me. Go Schizoid Jetson Hadland.
You guys are
Doxed.
fucking amateurs.
Yep.
I am the Schizoid Man. You can find me on youtube.com at the_schizoid_man. I make content about philosophy and economics.
Oh, what? Do you get good at this shit as soon as you turn like 18 or something? I don't know.
Yes.
And the links to everyone's shit will be in the description because these retards didn't explain it properly.
I didn't think we
Wow,
had.
you
you
said
say
you
the
did.
R slur. Wow.
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 Off to a great start already. All
You
right.
have to cut that out.
No, I don't think that one.
You just bleep it with a Walter Block meme of him
True.
saying
With a
slurs.
pipe drop.
Yeah.
So we got Hamas. Hamas.
Also, guys, I'm completely retarded. I didn't post the links that were gonna be. I didn't post the links like I said I was gonna.
Oh my
Should,
god.
should we just
Um,
restart this entire
No,
thing?
no. We're too far in. We're too far in.
No, I
Well,
don't.
lock in, guys.
Yeah, lock
Lock
in.
in.
Lock in.
Lock 'em in.
Let me just post the links.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Don't worry about it. We're off to a. We're
There is
We're-
nothing to investigate.
there is nothing to investigate. Fun fact.
There's
All right,
nothing
the
to
links
investigate.
are in fucking general.
Nothing ever happens.
Nothing does ever happen. All right, first story. School shooting in Georgia. What a change of
Sounds
mood.
pretty cringe.
All right, bro. All right. This is from AP News. Georgia school shooting stirs debate about safe storage laws for guns. Basically, all over the headlines, school shooting in Georgia. 14-year-old perpetrator. Important.
What?
The important things that are the important things to talk about here. This mainly is bringing up discussions of laws requiring requiring gun owners to store their weapons in certain ways, given that the shooter used his father's firearm to perpetrate the mass shooting. And this is a common trend seen in a lot of more recent mass shootings is the perpetrator's father, Colin Gray, is being charged as well, allegedly allowing his son to possess a weapon, according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. So, this is stirring whole fucking debate about gun control, the same debate that's been going on for a long time. Obviously, there's the surface level, all gun laws are necessarily violating the right to bear arms. However, you can look at specifically at laws requiring people to store their weapons in certain ways as Fuck, where was I go? Oh, fuck.
It's okay. You're doing great, sweetie.
You're doing great, sweetie.
Um,
Keep going, buddy.
dude. All right. All right. So, it. Does anyone wanna pick up on talking about gun
Sure.
control?
Yeah.
Schizoid, save us.
Stratino or me?
I'll
Either
let
one
you
of
go
you.
first.
I just want to say all of this is completely reactionary. Of course, this is a good anti-gun control argument, and it's good for a really good reason, is that we never focus on other things in our society that cause way more deaths than gun deaths. And in this particular example, where a minor got a hold of his father's firearm and caused havoc with it, we never think about the parallel situation of minors who do the same thing with their own parents' cars and cause havoc and death with their parents' cars. But we never see the same restriction on talking about automobile deaths, such as those kind of deaths, because automobiles are such a necessity to American society that we value automobiles and their negative consequences because their pros that they bring to our society is worth it to us. Now, why don't we have the same feeling towards firearms? It's because many parts of American society, firearm culture is dying, and in some parts it's just flat out dead. And so for those parts where they don't see the value and the necessity to firearms likened to automobiles, they see it as a gimmick. They don't see it as something that is useful, that has utility. And so to them, the pros do not outweigh those supposed cons where you're an irresponsible parent who allows their child to have access to things that they should not have access to at the time, or not teach them how to properly do them or handle them, or your child is mentally ill, which is a lot of the cases where these situations happen. Um, where am I going with this? Well, basically, point is that we always have to think about, like, for example, we're libertarians, specifically we're Austrian economics, and we always have to think about, like, the broken window fallacy. And I won't exactly get into the broken window fallacy right here. If you know it, you know it. But basically, we have to look at the bigger picture and we have to see what is unseen. And people who are reactionary to this kind of stuff do not look at what is unseen.
I'll also make a point. It's going to be a bit more elaborate one that I think that these sorts of claims about, oh, we need to outlaw guns, it goes all the way back to an intrinsic theory of value. It's the idea that there's something intrinsic about guns, that the guns are the issues and not the ideas that people hold, which cause them to value utilizing guns in such a way that would cause such havoc and evil. This is something that we see all of the time. And people will also say, oh, well, people, they made guns to intend to cause bad things. But that's such a twisted way of thinking about it. There's nothing intrinsic to a gun that necessitates unjust killing or murder. It can very much be used as self defense. It can very much just be used as displays, or if you're a collector, it's just this idea that there's something intrinsic about guns, that there's some kind of intrinsic value of guns. It's yet, but only people can value. Only people and their ideas, their consciousness, how they utilize these specific objects without which have no intrinsic value on their own, which is what people are getting mistaken about. It's the way that people in their ideas and how they utilize their actions and how they utilize these specific things, what they value. If their end is murder, well, we can tie that back not to the gun, but to the human. They were just merely using those means as the ends toward mass havoc and destruction. It's obviously not the gun intrinsically that is the evil here, it's the ideas.
Yeah. I mean,
Eh,
I was going to elaborate on how people don't tend to look at the causes, the environment that led up to such a situation. Instead, they just opt
Material conditions.
straight for they opt straight for getting rid of the guns themselves. This is sort of an error. You see this with maybe people wanting to combat inflation via maybe price controls or something. That's not addressing the actual causes that led up to what led up to this. It's simply it's not a proper solution. Which when we analyze the causes, the environment, we could analyze the public school system. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Oh yeah, that as well. I think that like even just to touch on the government and the state specifically, I think it's wild how people are like, we need this state, this monopoly of criminals in order to enforce my whims upon reality. That's wild, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. It's like there's some intrinsic evil to this gun, and we need to utilize the state in order to enforce my arbitrary whims unto reality.
And just generally regarding guns, the obviously like cars kill way more people in the U.S. than guns do. But uh, as Schizoid said, nobody talks about banning cars except for like a bunch of fucking retards on Reddit. It's exclusively guns are the subject of this insane oh, we need to ban this altogether. Why is that? Well, because guns genuinely do make it more difficult for the state to force its will upon people. If someone is being forced to do something that they don't want to do, then it's going to be a lot easier to force them to do that if they're unarmed. And abusing tragedies like that in order, like this one, in order to justify seizing people's property is only going to make it even easier for the state to oppress the people who it rules over.
Yes, they're trying to create a emotional investment in this, and um,
They're
Yeah,
trying
that's
to
honestly
abuse whims to justify their tyranny.
it's honestly like a perfect synthesis of the point because it's well, I mean like the of course the state will happily comply with taking away your guns, your basic rights to defense. Or I sound like a Republican here, but of course, but it is correct that of course the state would comply. You think that the state would be like, nah, nah, nah. We kind of we'll siphon this power away. Maybe if they were trying to manipulate you into thinking that you had like other rights or something like that, but that's a whole different thing. It's completely like predictable that the state would happily comply with a wild mob of people saying we need to take away guns. 'Cause it's like yes, yes, we do need to take away guns. Now we have more power over you because we need power in order to sustain ourselves.
To add further onto that, it is quite a classic case of divide and conquer, where the people who are pro Second Amendment are also pro military, pro foreign intervention, and pro
Mm-hmm.
cops.
Oh yeah.
Those are the people that would be suppressing their rights to bear arms, while the people who are anti-war, usually anti-war, anti-intervention, especially those who are anti-cops, those who are in the ACAB group, are also tend to be anti-Second Amendment, which then they are refusing the tools, the means for to defend themselves against state aggression. Now the state has the power to have the people with the guns on their side and the people without their guns, without guns against them, which they can easily divide and conquer. And with these stupid conservatives, these stupid Republicans, they always talk about like how my constitutionalist dad always talks about, we have the Second Amendment to fend off a tyrannical government. My response to him is, we've had a tyrannical government ever since the Constitution um, replaced and erased the Articles of Confederation. We've always had a tyrannical government pretty much for most of American history, especially ever since the Civil War and after the Lincoln administration. Definitely the tyranny has ramped up since then. And yet, have we ever seen a response, a true response from the Second Amendment people to address this issue through based means, we could say? No, because they're all in concert with state authority. They all believe in sucking off the dick and sucking the boot of state law enforcement and authoritarians for some reason, but it's working well into the hands of the state apparatus to divide and conquer us.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Absolutely.
obviously, like, and I think like the how the puzzle pieces fit so well, the anti-war people also being anti-gun and the pro-gun people also being pro-war, it creates like a perfect sort of like division against these people. Like it's such a partisan sort of thing where you just have like, constant fighting between two sides. It's always split into two sides for the most part because that's like what makes it easy. It has to be
It's always
us and
binaries.
them. It's always us versus them, so the state can create that sort of illusion in order to do more nefarious things. But I think that the fact that it's able to do that so well, to create that sort of partisan relationship between people where there's just a clear cut line of disagreement, and these people just constantly fighting over things. They're just both wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
And
this
then,
is this is the this is
or
really just a political illusion. Really, it's
yeah,
just the idea that this particular group, okay, these guys, not us, okay, these guys over here, they have power. They have unconditional power, and they are causing all of these horrible things. Okay, but our guys, okay, our politicians, no, 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 they're fighting for the good. They're um, but both sides have this sort of mentality when really the state as an institution, it does not really care about that. It's still going to perform its evils.
It's always a
and
question of
and
what
then
should the
also
state do.
on top of like the division of like libertarian interests, like you have some libertarian interests are, anti-war, um uh anti-war, for example, and then being pro-gun on the right, dividing those among two different groups that are opposed to one another, and then even then also feeding in issues that literally have no effect whatsoever, such as one of the most, like, I guess, emotional topics is just men in dresses, and whether or not the government should step in to prevent the men wearing dresses and in walking around and being around kids or using women's bathrooms, or if you should be forced to accept those and be completely okay and not acknowledge things as they are, um, you know, and consider it criminal in order to, if someone were to misgender or correctly gender someone. Um,
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, the culture war meta narrative really does lack nuance in all aspects.
Oh my
yeah.
god, don't say meta narrative in a
No,
but
I stand with James. Say meta narrative.
oh
It's a
my
cool
god.
word.
It's not a cool word.
I think
I
it
don't know
describes
what
the
meta
culture war.
narrative means.
Which
But
is
that's
why
the
I say
point.
don't
It's
use it.
funny.
I think I just think it describes the culture war as a whole. About how people really do think
We should describe
think
what
in
a
this.
meta narrative is first, just so nobody gets confused.
Yeah.
No.
You,
We should
Yeah, I
not.
know
We
what
should
it
say
is, but
big
you guys should
words. We should say
explain
big
what it is
words
so
like
that I
kaleidoscopically and catalactics and throw them out and not explain
No,
ourselves.
I
Well, ensure
know
Portlandorphically.
I know what meta narrative means, but just so I know you guys are talking about the same type of meta narrative, you guys should say what you mean by meta narrative.
Yeah, James.
real well, it's just generally speaking, a meta narrative is just an overarching account of several differing narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
I guess
It's,
one thing that's kind of interesting is that it's actually not really interesting. It's very predictable for us, but for I guess people that wouldn't think about it as much, it's always been a question of how can I utilize the state to impose their knee on someone who I disagree with's neck, and especially with the culture war. That's where it's most brutal. is that it's always a question of how am I supposed to utilize this monopoly on force, this like political object that has the end all be all, and be able to just get the other side, the people that I don't like, to just shut up already. It's always been that question, and it's both sides. People will really try to, if you told them that just verbatim, they'd completely disagree. They'd say, "Oh, well, it's about keeping the peace, or it's about keeping our traditional values for our a proper good society." And then you ask them, "Well, what does that entail?" And it's like it's one way or another. It's always going to be, "Oh, well, we have to use the state as a civil governor." Well, what is a civil governor? It's imposing their knee on this guy I don't like's neck in order to get him to shut up. It's always been that way. And as much as people like to sugarcoat that idea, it will always be that way because that's what politics is.
Slay.
Yes, I mean, the state
Go off, King.
necessitates coercion in order to maintain itself.
Yeah.
And the state eats it up. They love it. They're like, "Oh yes, yes," it's
Listen,
whoever
you
we
can
can please.
you can fix it by just voting, Stratino. You
So
don't
true.
Yeah,
understand?
guys, let's just vote. Let's just vote.
Just vote for someone who's gonna fix it.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, James, or not James, Schizoid touched on this earlier, but next thing that we're gonna pull up, from ANCAP Air on Twitter, solid account, kind of cringe but solid, talking about as far back as 1934, the federal government, National Firearms Act of 1934, Federal Firearms Act of 1938, U.S. v. Miller, Gun Control Act of 1968, Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986, so on and so forth. The Second Amendment, over the past century, hasn't applied. And then, at the state level, I'm sure you can go back even further to find it not applying.
Yeah, it's California especially.
Yeah.
And this, lets us talk about the broader conversation of the Constitution really hasn't been the like defender of liberty that conservatives and even some even probably too many libertarians like to paint it as, of oh yeah, the US is so much better off and the US is so much freer because we have the Constitution and the Constitution protects us, which sure in individual cases like you most cops are willing to abide by um are pressured to abide by the Bill of Rights. They for the most part won't search your domicile without probable cause.
I'd say it's about
However,
50-50.
yeah. um, However, broad scheme, in terms of the legislation that's being passed, it absolutely doesn't have any regard for what the Constitution says because the Constitution really hasn't done much for us.
Think
Yeah.
that I think the best response to all of that would have to be my most favorite Lysander quote, which would be, "Whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist." And
Goodness.
no truer words ring more true than today. Lysander
Goodness.
Spooner.
Straight fire.
See, this is why I love Lysander Spooner so much. He just
Mhm.
spits straight fire. And this is actually a good segue into because we brought up the concept of voting. People really like to think that you're able to just vote into their idea is we're just able to vote into Congress a bunch of people, a bunch of pro-gun politicians. We'll just hire a bunch of criminals, these very trustworthy criminals, right? Because we all know that criminals are very trustworthy and don't get bribed or lobbied or anything like that. They're just these complete angels in the governance, and they'll just protect our rights. Absolutely not. We've seen the most recent example I think was, especially with the Second Amendment specifically, Donald Trump with the bum stocks ban. Donald Trump was always trying to say. I'm pro gun. I'm pro gun. I actually do have a terrible Trump accent, but like,
Guys,
um,
I am so pro gun. I said, wow, I am so pro
Oh, I
gun.
I said,
know.
"Wow, I'm
You're
so pro
terrible at
gun,"
doing that. You're
I,
terrible at doing that. You should be ashamed, actually.
I know.
and
I am
and
pro
I was
gun.
the
I
most pro-gun president, maybe ever.
you don't know
and
the
Donald
second
Trump at
minute.
the fucking LP convention.
oh my
Uh,
god, that was
he was like,
so bad.
I am the most libertarian ever.
And I said,
I mean,
"Wow, I'm so libertarian."
I'll get one libertarian in my cabinet.
And this is what happened.
RFK,
He
my
enacted
favorite
the bum
libertarian.
stocks ban, and literally what the bum stocks ban did is it like made like thousands of people just criminals over because it got rid of the due process that I mean at least like some other Second Amendment, you know, violations. At least it had due process where it was like okay, you can. Keep your guns, I guess. Whoever has it before we ban it. But no, no, Trump just was like,
Yeah,
nah, no, they're
literally,
all criminals.
So
there's
in
Donald
legal
Trump.
terms, that's called grandfathered in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
see.
Put
Yeah,
know.
that out there.
there's the
I mean,
there's the
even
Donald Trump like quote, like basically saying word for word, we like to take the guns first, go through due process second.
And literally, that was an executive decision by him. People like to say, "Oh, he was bribed to do it," or "Oh, he had to do something." And it's like, what
oh,
do you
even
mean?
if he was bribed, would have been good.
Yeah.
Even if he was bribed or he had to do something, I don't care. It was an executive decision made by him specifically. Like,
And again, going back to how the Constitution is useless, that is the president, the executive branch, legislating. That is completely against everything the Constitution stood for. You aren't supposed to have a legislator in the executive office. No, that the lawmaking is supposed to be done by Congress, but nobody's been abiding by that because nobody ever fucking cared about the Constitution whatsoever.
I said, "Wow, I'm such a good legislator."
I
We also many libertarians forget that the Constitution was literally an expansion of federal power. It was at a point in U.S. history where the federal government believed that they did not have enough federal power, and the Federalists, namely John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, I think James Madison too, campaigned for the repeal of the Articles of Confederation and to establish the Constitution, the new Constitution, in the Federalist Papers. And the whole purpose, simply just because that they were too much in debt from the war, from the Revolutionary War, and they wanted more money and they wanted more ways to levy and extort money out of the American population, and they needed more federal power. So they literally scrapped the Articles of Confederation, which the Articles of Confederation was what it was. It was a confederation, the opposite of a federation. People often forget what is a confederation. A confederation is more like alliance of people or like a group of alliance. Like every member of the confederation are equal and they are allowed to leave or allowed to participate in changing the union, but we're all equal and there's nothing over us ruling us. That would be a confederation. But a federation is where there's something ruling above the members that are telling the members what to do, that the members don't get to really decide what to do equally among them.
I
And
mean,
that change that change from a maybe James will explain it better, but I just want to say that change from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution was the death of the United States of America and the beginning of the United Empire of America. It was truly a new government, and it was a terrible government.
I mean, yeah, I'd talk about the transition from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution as just an example of the state, the government, changing its techniques, due to an altering environment and such all different way. Actually, no, scrap that. Let me reword that.
You may need to define
They're lack.
techniques for the people listening.
They're after Shays Rebellion, they realized that their their current way of doing things were becoming outdated if they wish to
Which,
actually maximize their own efficiency as an
for
institution.
just for context, Shays Rebellion was basically a tax revolt that happened in Massachusetts in, I think, what was it, the 1790s or the 1780s?
I think it was the 1780s because the 1790s was the Whiskey
Yeah.
Rebellion.
Yeah.
Stratino's our historian here, so I feel like he would verify that. Also,
Oh,
I can
I'm the
just look it up.
historian.
I can simply just look it up. I have Google right in front of me.
Oh well, I zoned out. So
Bruh.
I maybe shouldn't
Stratino's
do
out
that.
here like, I'm gonna rant forever, and then when someone else talks, I'm not gonna pay attention. It was in
That is
1787,
that is
1786 to
literally
1787, and for context, I believe the Constitution was ratified in 1789.
Right.
All right, go off, Queen, James.
Um,
Bruh,
I
you have
don't
to,
know.
come on.
What?
You were talking about Shay's Rebellion.
Yes, I was. Yes. It's it was just demonstrating that their current model, their current organizational model, which was um outlined in the Articles of Confederation, where it was now being rendered ineffective if they wish to maximize their own sort of efficiency as an institution. Because that's ultimately what the state is. An institution in its own interest, wishing to maximize its own efficiency. People, and it does that necessarily by unilateral control.
Yep.
And even because you can just look at like the shifting of how quickly American politics went from the like extreme, like very radical libertarianism, almost anarchism, like the American revolutionaries were literally being called anarchists by the British. um you can look at how rapidly that shifted from being libertarian to, you know, getting to where we are today. Because even the Federalists, um, I never realized this until I was reading the book I'm currently reading, Freedom's Anchor by Judge Napolitano, is the Federalists, like just the average Federalist, obviously there was, probably nefarious motivations among like people like Hamilton. The Federalists, they feared that local governments, state governments, would suppress the rights of the people, which is why they wanted the federal government, because they thought the federal government would do a better job of protecting rights. So even then, it was still the reason for doing this among most of the Federalist movement was not like it wasn't a statist movement. It was libertarian in nature, right? They wanted to better protect liberty. Um, and then even people like Hamilton, these radical Federalists, even they still like acknowledged things like a right to secession under the Constitution. Hamilton acknowledged a right to secession. Obviously, Jefferson did. And just in the like 70 years from then to the 1860s, that completely withered away. Um, and all it took.
It was Abraham Lincoln who set the
Yeah,
precedent that
yeah,
you're not allowed to secede from the Union. He
yeah,
set the precedent that the Union is no longer a voluntary union.
yeah,
I'll also
But
say
Abraham
like
Lincoln, hero, freed the slaves.
I'll,
yeah.
I'll
So
also
true.
I'll also
And
say for the record,
For
before
the
we even
record,
go
you're on court.
before we get into anything, anything further, I have to make it explicitly clear that the Confederacy was equally as evil as the Union. It's not the
Yes.
secession part that was so evil about the Confederacy. There's definitely the slavery part. We don't see the Confederacy as like a bunch of and I think that people like Atun Shea and Cynical Historian have actually like made really good points about this. That the Confederacy is not some sort of decentralized utopia that so many lost causers believe it to be. It was extremely centralized, even for like 1800 standards. It was pretty centralized. It
well, yeah, it
was
was very largely like just a military government.
Yeah, it was a military government. It was, and we have to. I think that people like to think that it was very decentralized because it was kind of decentralized for the people in power, such as the slave owners and
Yeah,
the
True
more.
libertarians would
it's
recognize that the Confederacy and the Union are bad, that the Confederacy and Abraham Lincoln are bad. Just because we say that we as libertarians are anti-interventionists and we think it was a very bad decision for Abraham Lincoln to intervene on the secession of the Confederacy does not mean we endorse the Confederacy at all, of course.
Absolutely, and that's the point that I have to make.
However,
yeah,
also I think like the attack on Lincoln and the Unionists, it doesn't especially among or not especially but like among libertarians when they make the argument, oh yeah, Confederacy was bad but the invasion of the Confederacy was bad, is that even then there still isn't room for like sympathy of what was done to Southerners, because like Southerners, not every Southerner was a slave owner. That was a very that was a small percentage of Southerners that were slave owners, and even the innocent Southerners that had done nothing wrong, the only crime they had committed was live within a certain boundary which had declared independence from the United States. They had their entire lives ruined. They had their houses burned. They had their daughters and wives raped, and um, and you can obviously there's Sherman's March to the Sea.
Mhm.
Um, I forget who it was who orchestrated it. It might have been Lincoln himself that ordered it.
I'm a,
That just
I'm a bit
completely
it was
scorched
partial to
General
Shenandoah
Sherman.
Valley.
Sherman himself.
I'm not even gonna lie. I'm still a bit partial to Sherman's March, but you digress.
Um, and also
We can fact check this. Is there anything we got Google.
Well, I think there's also another good point is that, like, honest to God, they had a for the draft, the Confederate draft. It was created in such a way that many plantation owners were allowed to get out of it by paying like a
yeah,
sum of money or having a
Yeah,
specific number of slaves,
yeah.
while a bunch of just like random ass Southerners just had to get like drafted into the military. And I think there is a point to be made that many of the innocent quote unquote Southerners, um, I don't count as so innocent because they were a lot of them were very partial to the Confederacy, and a lot of them did kind of voluntarily join the Confederate military. Though there are those like Southerners who were just completely like barraged against and just completely wrecked. Their lives were just completely wrecked and ruined, especially during Reconstruction. Like Reconstruction was genuinely one of the worst periods in history. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that both this is one of those rare things that both the Democrats and Republicans, even our modern times of in the history of America, have always agreed on, is that Reconstruction was a failure. It's just that their conclusions of how it should be done were just two completely different things. As the libertarian approach was to say to not intervene with, I guess, not have all of that government intervention, that it was the government intervention that caused all of those such things. And especially I think that there is an argument that many people give that's like, oh well, about sharecropping propped up, right? Well, sharecropping cropped up because of the state intervention. Such a it created such a there's so many barriers, like such as the Freedmen's Bureau. The state was kind of monopolizing so many abilities for market forces to come in. And I think even Rothbard talks about this. I forgot where, but I remember reading it. That since
I I know Di Lorenzo covers Reconstruction in his first book on Lincoln. Um, and he talks about how race relation like the precedent for race relations in the South, blacks and whites just having absolute hatred for black people, starts with how the Republicans acted during Reconstruction. The Republican Party during Reconstruction just used black people as tools, right?
yeah,
When black people got the ability to vote in the US, um the literally they were just like told to register Republican, which obviously Southerners hated Republicans at that time, so they they're immediately just going to start hating black people, and that set precedent for what would eventually become Jim Crow laws and the brutal segregation and the violent reaction to the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and this is, I think, and I will say, let's see, because I do want to bring up the KKK, but I also do have to make it clear that I think that a lot of modern historians are correct to say that the KKK was not, caused specifically by, the radical Republicans and boo-hoo, victimize the South sort of thing that many lost causers give. It's a it is also, it was caused by genuine racism, but it also
Yeah.
was caused by actual, you know, it was caused by actual intervention. It can be both, because you have many people on both sides. Um, I think the arguments on both sides are correct for this. Um, and I think that, and actually, I think that the KKK is a really good example of how the radical Republicans, their ability to, shift the, I guess, like, or in ignite, that's the correct term, is the ability for the radical Republicans at the time to ignite the South into causing such chaos. It's, it does kind of make a point to intervention. And I guess there's another thing that I
Hey,
have.
Stratino,
What?
this ain't the Stratino show. James,
Oh
what
my!
do you think?
What's
Do you have
what?
anything to say, James?
What
Quiet,
do?
quiet, Jizoid.
Well, we could let Stratino finish.
Well, I do want to clarify because I think I like accidentally painted it in the wrong way. Racism was obviously the standard in the South prior to Reconstruction, and then it
Yeah,
was just severely worsened by the
it was
process of
ignited again.
Reconstruction, of and whereas usually what you tend to see when you have different like ethnic groups or like racial groups living amongst each other is you generally see less racism, um, whereas in the South you had more racism. You didn't have the like just decline in hatred of black people because black people were being used by Republican politicians, and were also just being abused by the state because the state just enabled all of these things because they were, we're gonna help out, we're going to try and help out black people, but really all it did was it made black people reliant to an extent on the state. Obviously not to the same extent as it would in like the 50s and 60s, when in the beginning of welfare state or the beginning of the welfare state.
And I
um,
Yes, yes.
honestly,
Actually,
and
um,
and also like I think it was Frederick Douglass who said this. I think prior to the Civil War, what do we do with black people once we've abolished slavery? You leave them alone. You don't need to do anything with them. Let them be. Just leave them be. Stop
don't dictate their
fucking
lives.
abusing them.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing where before the welfare state, um, mutual aid societies actually were sort of the norm with Africans, Black Americans who were struggling and such before the rise of the welfare state and made them dependent upon welfare, etc. Which is what the state wants.
Yeah.
and even to go off of that as well, to then synthesize those 2 points, but I sound like a Hegelian. I guess to bring James and Gamerizer's point together, the welfare state did cause, and especially a lot of these state regulations did cause, like, it's also Jim Crow laws. We're just all of this state intervention that was built up over time by FDR, and I mean, like, who else?
Lyndon B.
Truman, and
Johnson.
then Eisenhower and Johnson. Even before Johnson, though, it was especially that 50s and 60s time. The race tensions were heightened, because the state was still using African Americans in such a way that caused so much race divide. Segregation caused race divide, and there was also, even, I guess, after the 60s, since, African Americans were discriminated so much, and especially systemic racism caused them to become so dependent upon welfare that many of the South of the time kind of looked at African Americans and saw them as lazy and bums and moochers, and it heightened race relations, and you still see this kind of now, is that you see a lot of people, and it's less so about race now, but there's still kind of a thin veil of racism, kind of just of the past, and maybe brought on from the past, where it's always, oh well, these minorities and these African Americans, they're so reliant on welfare, and so needed for, they're just completely stuck on a dole, and they're lazy, they do nothing, they don't work a job, they're just a bunch of gangsters. And sure, it seems that way at first, but that's nothing intrinsic about them. It's caused by the state. It's caused by so much state regulation heightening those relations.
and like looking at race relations in the US, they did like get better throughout the 70s and 80s, right? um Anyone who is old enough, like, if you ask anyone that's old enough to remember it, they'll tell you race relations in the 90s were better than they are today. um and it's been over the past like decade or two where you've sort of seen trying to reuse race as a means to divide and conquer,
Uh,
um, in order to um, divide and conquer and bring about even more state control over our lives.
Yep.
yeah, and I mean this relates back to the culture war. Obviously, it's fueling these tensions.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Especially this idea that like we're all trapped in a box, and that box has a little note written on it. Says, "We're the state. How can we help?" And
Yeah.
that's the confines that they try to propagandize you into thinking that you're in. It's, we're the state. You rely on us. What can we do to aid you in your conquest? And it's a lot of people, they don't know the solution. They don't know the solution of liberty. It hasn't been told to them because it's been lost and obfuscated by the state. The state has made it so that there is such a box, that it's, you have to rely on them. And it goes back to one of the two main arguments for statism, which is the pragmatic approach, which is that, you know without us, you have nothing, you have no control, you have not even over your own life, things will become chaos, so you need us, and because you need us, how can we be of service to your devious conquests? And that's kind of what has fueled so many people. This is kind of what's fueled the divide. The divide is caused artificially by the state. It's, or we need more welfare, or oh, we need less welfare but more police to crack down on the blacks. We need to set them up straight. Oh, we need
need to
forced
unleash the cops.
education. Unleash the cops upon the bums. It's that sort of thing. And that is, oh, and the state has meticulously crafted this narrative. I'll leave it hell. I'll even use the term meta narrative just to make James happy. It's used this meta narrative in order to establish this. It's an artificial narrative. There are only two ways to solve this issue, and they all devolve back to us, the state.
Weren't we
Yeah.
talking about the Constitution?
Yeah.
Yeah, this has
Yeah,
us
it
to
changed.
do with it.
It's
You guys wanna move on to
It
the
can change.
next topic? Cause you guys, um, all three of you seemed that like you wanted to discuss AI. So I'm just
Oh yeah.
gonna leave the floor open. Anyone wants to start that conversation? Because I don't. It wasn't me who suggested that.
AI is based.
True,
Art
it is.
Art is a necessity for man's survival. It's not enough for man to hold a philosophy implicitly or explicitly in his consciousness. He needs to see his philosophy in real time as a real concrete existent out in reality. And that
Like,
is the purpose that art serves for man, is to concretize his philosophy for him. And if an art affirms his philosophy, he feels affirmed to exist in reality. Now, why does this go back to AI? And specifically, the conversation that I want to have is about AI art. Is that AI art is revolutionary in the sense that it democratizes everyone to be their own artists without requiring the skills to be an artist. The skill gap is lowered, and the barrier to entry to make art is much lowered with AI art. But often people associate AI art or AI in general with slop. And the reason why is it's valid because a lot of people with this democratization makes a lot of slop because they don't know what the fuck they're doing. However, as evident by Stratino's, in my opinion, amazing, phenomenal work with using Udio, which is a website that makes AI music, he can make things like we both used Udio, and he is honestly the best Udio maker I've ever heard. He knows how to use Udio because just like any other tool, like a tool brush or a paintbrush, I mean, um, it's not the tool's fault, such as people associate AI art with slop. It's not the tool's fault that it's slop. It's the artist's fault that it's slop. And it's not slop when Stratino makes it. So I guess I suggested the idea of maybe ending the podcast in maybe a reaction to one of
right.
his AI songs to show that something that he puts hours and hours and effort into it um, can can end up not being slop while still being AI.
Oh, yeah. And
Yes.
before we do
So
it,
we'll touch back on this later. Towards
Yeah.
the, or if you guys want to continue discussing AI for now, and then we'll just go back to it toward at the end of the show, or we could just play it mid-show, but that would be less fitting. I
When does
yeah,
the show end?
There's no we're like no specific time, just whenever we like get through all of the conversation
because
we.
it's whenever Schizoid has to go.
I gotta go like preferably between 6:30 and 7, somewhere around that.
All right.
Okay, so that's what 10 for us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we, if we want, we can continue after Schizoid's gone, but
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, well, I guess we're gonna have to have Schizoid here to react to it as well because he gave us his idea. But I also, I guess I'll touch on the idea that like there's so much AI slop. There's just a lot of art slop. Like, come on. Like, what are you talking
oh
about?
yeah,
That there's just, it's you're gonna attribute it to AI. Go to any art museum and just look at the amount of slop. It's not even art. And this
Um,
is, oh no, no, James
yeah.
coming.
You can go in that direction. I was gonna focus primarily on the implications of AI in labor and such. So like
Go
for
ahead,
example,
buddy.
people fear that automation will occur. Okay, that AI will replace jobs and such. Now, am I going to deny that? No, no, because that is what happens. However, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with with the sort of creative destruction of wage labor as an institution. I actually believe that AI will um, permit a sort of decentralized market society where entrepreneurs oper- operate with are able to operate independently of a sort of boss. It's they're their own boss in a way. I think Konkin This is how he basically characterized an anarchist society. But I, I also I see it as the state wanting to regulate and kind of have a good grasp over AI. But the reason why is because if AI were free to the people, then self sufficiency would be developed, and that's not what the state wants, right? The state wants you to be dependent upon them. Um, so the moment people start becoming self sufficient, they're able to create their own markets and such independent of the state's own rule because they try to legitimize their rule on the people and interactions in society. AI makes that a lot more difficult. I'll just say that.
I'll make James'
Absolutely
point.
agree.
I'll make James' point even better, and this is coming from this perspective of a guy who fucking hates left Rothbardians. I despise them as much as Hoppians. Um, I think what is important to look at is the philosophy of liberty and libertarianism. What is it really about? What are some core aspects of liberty and libertarianism? Well, it's individualism for one, and another thing is the idea that man must produce and be self-sufficient to survive. That it is the process of production which grants him, the alleviation of his unease, and it grants him a better state of affairs. That's kind of at the core of liberty and libertarianism, is that self-sufficiency and individualism. What's more individualistic than being your own self-sufficient entrepreneur on your own? One who, like, a philosophy, if we're talking about a philosophy of liberty, that seems to logically follow from those core tenets of the philosophy of liberty and libertarianism. The idea that, man must produce to survive and must be self-sufficient to survive, is that some the people how a philosophy of libertarianism comes about is kind of the practical application of libertarianism, which relies on that philosophy of liberty. So, I mean, that seems to be a very apparent practical application of liberty, is being self-sufficient in being the master of your own creation, having that full unilateral autonomy over yourself and your own products and your own ability to shape things to however you deem fit, to meticulously craft things to however you deem to see the best state of affairs to be. That is all so rooted in a philosophy of liberty that it is almost no doubt in my mind that we will see that in an economy,
And
because
to
that's
Yeah.
clarify what
Yes.
Stratino means and James what they mean by self-sufficiency, they're not talking about the rugged Luddite homesteader off in the middle of the wilderness, having all their means and needs and wants met by themselves, but rather they're envisioning a kind of market economy where there is not so much, if at all, worker boss relationships, where there are massive mega corporation office complexes where you have to clock in and do what the man tells you to do, but rather they're viewing that everyone's their own entrepreneur, providing value to the market and trading with others in the marketplace as self-employed entrepreneurs, just
and
to
that
Yeah.
only
clarify.
and that
I
only
think that there's
Who will
so
win?
I mean, a lot of libertarians, unfortunately, do have a bit of a vulgar conception of this, where they'll sort of equate the idea of a free society with this sort of current politicized environment, to where so fiat norms, basically norms that emerge from the state's more abstract rule over people. Um, they associate the byproducts of that with a free society. So they might say like a sweatshop, for example. They might say yeah they might defend that when we could recognize that as something that's vulgar.
yeah, like what was I gonna say? I think I was gonna say another thing. Oh yeah, I think that the conception of self-sufficiency as so Luddite is kind of caused by the state in many ways. It's kind of disincentivized that sort of self-sufficiency and has promoted an idea of over reliance on others. And that's kind of been no more apparent than the idea that we kind of need so many, and I'd say hierarchical structures. I'm not trying to sound Ancom or even left Rothbardian here, because I don't even think this is left Rothbardian. I think this is just true. Is that just this idea that you know, employing oneself to be the masters of their own creations and to have full unilateral control over their own production at the expense of no other man who is doing the same thing on his own. That is such a that's kind of at the root of liberty. And I think that another part of vulgar libertarianism, one thing that I just despise about vulgar libertarianism is the idea that, a libertarian society just, it won't look too different from now. It'll kind of be the same, you know.
You see, we'll be shopping at Walmart, but the prices will be 2% lower.
Yeah, like, oh my god, it's
And I just want to clarify what we mean by vulgar libertarian, which, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't use the term very much. A vulgar libertarian is a libertarian who will look at, things like sweatshops or corporations and be like, oh, well, they're voluntary, therefore it's completely fine, and they sort of dismiss the concerns of like leftists who are concerned about wages and working conditions and all that, and they'll just dismiss that as, oh well, you're just greedy, you just want to have what other people want, whereas, well, the proper answer to those concerns is, no, those are valid concerns, but it's the state that's created these conditions where that's happening.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
and
you did explain it correctly. Basically,
yeah. And
it's one of it's yeah,
I think that
it's a concept I think is very useful for identifying.
oh, it is. And we can boil down the question to a very simple question. That is, what might an anarchist society look like? Because the answers always vary from what theory of anarchism you actually hold. So, someone like Hoppe will tell you that anarchism looks relatively the same as to what the world looks like now or historically, i.e., feudalism, um, but with less war and I guess less diversity, because he
No gay
holds this
people.
because he sees achieving liberty as a way of order and the means to regressing back to the ways of old. It's some sort of return to tradition for him. Now, if you ask someone like Murray Rothbard or Samuel Edward Konkin, um, they'd tell you that the world of anarchism would be radically new and unseen. It was because Rothbard saw anarchism as a progression to a new way of life,
For a
uh,
new liberty.
for a new liberty.
Roll the credits.
He was willing to think outside of that political box. He wasn't looking at, and Hoppe tries to say this in the preface of the Ethics of Liberty. He'll try to say Murray Rothbard was trying to go back to the ways of old and trying to I guess the idea was that he was just like looking back at old traditions and saying, hey, you know, this is just basically what it's gonna look like, and this has already been solved. Rothbard
Naturalistic
was
route.
like, yeah. Rothbard was like, no, no, this is completely new. This is completely revolutionary. You've never seen this before. Like, sure, you had like John Locke, who gave you kind of the bits and specks of the idea, but no, no, this is completely new. I've completely devised this kind of on my own, and what you're about to see is nothing you've ever seen before. nothing in history you've seen before, nothing in society you've ever seen before. This is completely new. This is toward a new liberty. This is for a new liberty, one that
Yes.
it's completely progressive of history. It's not regressive. We're not regressing to any sort of specific tradition. We're not stuck in that political box because it seems that politics has kind of d- been the factor that's prevalent in almost all of history, that we care about at least, which is kind of the past 2,000 years. Rothbard was like, no, no, this is a post-political society, one where no politics exist. There is no state here. Therefore, it's nothing we've seen before. And
Yeah.
I think that anyone who answers the question, what might an anarchist society look like? Anyone who says that it would look anywhere near what we have now or have had in history does not understand anarchism or libertarianism. You can get the fuck out.
Yeah. I mean, we just we just have to discuss those people, um, just exactly the economics of it and how the state pressures and manipulates the environment to fit their own their own efficiency, their own goals.
I mean, you could like you can point to specific things that exist today or have existed in the past as being like, oh well, how would a society look like? Well, you'd have more of this thing that exists today that's pretty efficient and does and is very effective. Like for example,
Yeah.
like if you want landscaping done on your house, um you just go to someone who does landscaping and you hire them for that specifically. And you hire the person that's doing it directly most of the time. Maybe they'll have a couple of employees. Um,
Yeah.
rather
But
than going to like a huge hierarchical structure and then purchasing something from someone who received it from someone else who obtained it from someone else making it, um, all under the same structure as opposed to people doing things as their as like owners of their own businesses, um, like you
may
see.
I
Yeah.
may I tie this back into AI art? I've
Yes.
noticed that there is a tendency as technology advances, there is less of a need for centralization in in production. For example, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even 90s, and before that time, in order for a musician to make being a musician and making music as a career, they would need a team of musicians with them. They would need a team of sound engineers. They need a studio, and they'd need a big publisher to promote their music. To break through in the music industry was a lot of barriers simply just because the technology at the time could not allow for those barriers of entry to be lowered down. But as time progressed and as technology advanced, such as well, before I'm talking about before AI music, but I'm talking about digital audio workspaces where a musician can make music that used to require a whole bunch of people to make, but now I can go on FL Studios and with the right plugins and the right skill, I can construct an orchestra or a symphony all on my own in the comfort of my own bedroom. And it's pretty amazing. I may have never constructed a symphony before, but I have constructed, for example, a a violin cello
Yeah, I
quartet
remember that.
that was it was pretty cool, messing around with that stuff. It may not, I may not have broken through the music industry with my really awesome 2 minute long string quartet. But the fact of the matter is that before this technology, I would have to find three other musicians plus a whole bunch of other people just to even release the music. But now I can do all that music all in the comfort of my own home. However, there still is a barrier to entry, as in I have to learn the skill of music theory and composition, and I still have to learn the skill of how to work a digital audio workspace like FL Studios, which is quite an instrument in itself, and I think it's pretty impressive for anyone who knows how to work FL Studios or other DAWs out there. With the advent of AI, the barrier of entry will continue to be lowered. Now, the point that I bring all of this up is that before there was, in order for production to happen, there needed to be a lot of people involved. But now, as a musical musician entrepreneur, I can, well, before and after I can make music and break through as a musical entrepreneur all on my own. And so, to relate this real life example to any libertarians who are skeptical that we would not see a vast reduction in wage work or a complete elimination altogether, I think this real life example where technology advance and therefore we need less people in a specific stage of production, it goes back to like what I was talking about. Like, we're not talking about how we're talking about the elimination of the stage of production altogether. There will still be stages of production where there'll still be people working together cooperatively and voluntarily in the free market, but it won't be like how we see it today, where a specific stage of production requires a hierarchy of people to manage it. Everybody will be their own self-sufficient entrepreneur.
Mm.
And
Yeah, yes.
also, the elimination of like barriers to entry hasn't only happened with making music, but also with getting music to be spread to other people, right? If you want to like publish music that anyone can listen to around the world, today versus 30, 40 years ago, 40 years ago you had to go to a record label and they had to sign you, whereas now all you need is a Spotify account.
Yep.
Hell, I upload my shit to YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, is this
If
a good time to maybe even transition to this? I haven't listened to the song that you sent in general.
Oh yeah.
well
Ooh,
Or do we want to continue with something else?
yeah, I think we
I don't
should
have to
listen
leave
to it.
until like another 20 minutes.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I wanna bring up the next topic that I had on the list, which is I think really isn't covered by a lot of libertarians, um I'm not well versed in the argument against it, is defamation, specifically um currently you know right leaning conservative, whatever you want to call him, Tim Pool is currently suing the Harris campaign for defamation. And let me pull it up. And I just want to bring up.
Tim Pool is homesteading government money based?
And
Uh,
I sort of just want to like open the floor for you guys to talk about defamation in general and why defamation isn't really um,
A crime.
a valid tort. Um, because it's something that I have barely discussed and or talked about, and I think because of that, like if someone as well versed in libertarianism as me doesn't know much about the argument for this or more against it, um, then clearly it's something which we need to elevate more, because someone who's just surface level into libertarianism would have no clue.
If someone was surface level into libertarianism, I feel like it's important to bring up the burden of proof. I feel like this is one of those situations where instead of trying to defend that defamation is not a crime, we need to spin it upon the people who support defamation. How is it a crime? What is being stolen? What rights are being violated here?
it sort
It's
of relates
violating my
to
character.
it sort of relates to the libertarian critique of intellectual property, I would say.
Yep.
Yes, I
It
was
Because
I was
actually
gonna bring it up.
it's a direct twin sister to that.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, because ultimately what we're dealing with is was ideas, okay, and we're to abstractions, we may call them. You can't declare ownership over them. that
Declare ownership over the way that I utilize my mouth to speak words. That is literally.
yes,
It's
because
like
in order to enforce that, you'd have to violate the property rights of other people
you'd
and
have to
such. And
enforce
it'd be a lot.
voluntary slavery. It's like the idea that that this person owns me. They own the rights over my mouth and what I say, and over the words that I use or the things that I type.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
And because
if you stoke a
fundamentally,
fire, I
right, me saying that Stratino is a complete moron and never has anything right. Um,
No, true.
if I say that, right, sure, I've said something that isn't true, allegedly. Um,
Duh.
I've said something that isn't true, and I've said something that we can prove to be untrue. However, Stratino can't sue me because one, um, right, he can't really prove any damages from that. Right, like, if you
Emotional damage.
like the most commonly what you'll look at with like defamation cases is you'll look at like, oh well, we had a decline in sales following that, but can is that did it happen because of the the defamation, or did it happen despite or did it happen simply coincided with the defamation, or um did the defamation, would there have been a decline anyway and the defamation just made it slightly worse, yada yada.
To
um
what degree?
and also, you can't even, there isn't a conflict there, because when I say that, I'm Stratino is completely free in all of his property to do whatever he wants in it. I haven't initiated a conflict over anything that Stratino owns, and I haven't defrauded him. uh Therefore he is completely untouched and uninfringed upon, and he doesn't have any grounds to sue me for anything whatsoever.
And if we really want to take the idea that, oh, I was called a meanie, stoopy, spoopy, poo poo head, and now my sales are going down. Well, is it the sales going down that's the conflict? Okay. All competition is conflict initiating. You cannot compete. If you have three customers and two lemonade stands, and I make better lemonade, the other lemonade stand is getting less sales now. Is that a conflict? Is there conflict when some person loses sales or potential profit?
Have a good
Like,
night, guys. Sorry, I'm gonna go now. Goodbye.
oh
I'll listen to the song
goodbye.
later, or maybe
Okay.
we continue that another podcast. Have a
All
good
right.
Alright.
one.
All right,
Alright.
see
all
you.
right, goodbye, Schizoid.
Then,
Yeah.
well,
And
you want to top it off?
yeah, I guess we don't really have to talk about the last topic, because
Mm.
um the last topic was just going to be a discussion about World War II, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss World War II in the future.
Yeah, like World War
Yeah.
II is so over talked about.
True. Uh, Granted, it was very important, but so yeah, I guess we'll do plugs again. Schizoid, who just left, you can find him the Schizoid Man on YouTube. I think he's also just the Schizoid Man on Twitter. Um, you can find me on YouTube, the channel which this is being uploaded on, just Gamerizer, at Real Gamerizer on YouTube, on Twitter at Gamerizer underscore. Um, James.
Yeah, yeah. You could just find me on YouTube at James Delivery, and even if you want to just yeah, I'll just plug that. Bye.
Stratino.
Yep. I guess you can find me at, I think, on YouTube at Stratos Limpas. And then there's also Gaslighting Abby, which is at Gaslighting Abby on YouTube as well. Both of those channels. And then I never use Twitter, But if you really are like if you're just one of those like freak bastards who uses Twitter, you can find me at Stratino Lampino. I
Who
Yeah.
don't
never
do
used
anything.
Twitter.
There's no point in following me. Please don't follow me. I
I
don't
mean,
want
I
Follow
notifications.
Stratino.
you can find. I mean, I was gonna plug my Twitter, but I don't really use it all that much. 'Cause I'm not
I literally
a
never
freak.
use Twitter.
At Liberated James, guys.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll be back probably similar upload time next week. Thanks. Hello. Welcome to. All right, this guy's banned.